Good morning to everyone. So today there is an arrangement for two sessions. One is compassion in long run.
Should I put it very close to you?
Should I eat it? And there are two sessions, but it seems it is pretty much related to one another, because compassion in long run, something like that, is the topic of the first session, and compassion in daily life is the topic for the second session. So unless you have a compassion in daily life, you cannot have a compassion for long run, right? And compassion itself is not a kind of dose that you can take for a while and then utilize it for a certain period of time and then get out of it. So it is something that is to be part of your life, and then only it benefits, right? So today I think from a Buddhist point of view, from the Mahayana Buddhist point of view, I would like to place the concept of compassion, and in between I can talk also without basing it on maybe next session, without basing on a particular kind of religious system, compassion, how compassion is relevant in our daily life, right? So compassion, before going into that, most of you, during the last two teachings, you have heard me. So I think it is, to set the tone, it is important to realize the current, situation where we are, because we take it for granted that this is the way of life, this is, supposed to be, and this is what we are, and but this has all come, either it is good or bad, has evolved in course of, so many years in human culture and human society, and then before that, the natural evolutionary kind of, process. So in terms of the earth, and then in terms of how the life began, and then how human beings, emerged out of that, and then how they started exploring, and then things like that. That has a very long story. So therefore, basically, when the exploration started, then discoveries began. So, explore for what? Maybe during Stone Age time, people explored, might not have, I'm not a historian, but when they explored, or they might not have explored fire, which is very important kind of, component in our life. And due to rubbing, to winds and things like that, then fire emerged, and then they saw fire, and then out of that some animals might have got burned, and some foods might have got burned, and then that cooked taste, started tasting good, and then they found that there is a cooked and there is a raw, and then there is how vegetations grew, and then it can be grown, deliberately, and things like that, that evolved in course of time, right? So when people started having problems which were out of their hand, then they started worshipping some kind of, visualizing or thinking of some kind of, special and supernatural power with the nature, right? So in very early human history, you can find the history of worshipping, river, worshipping sun, worshipping moon, worshipping and the forest and the things like that. So when human beings found that we have a limited, power, then there is some kind of, source of power which can solve our problems, right? Then they started worshiping, and then again there emerged some spirit power, power of spirit, and then started worshipping spirits and things like that. So that is how religion came into picture, right? And then later, the other aspect of the human exploration started, that the nature, reality of life, and then philosophy emerged, right? Philosophy is much earlier than the science, and so according to philosophy, it explored the nature of life, nature of world, and then different kinds of philosophical systems have had explored different the realities, and then the scientific the science culture came into existence, and when science started exploring the world, then it started exploring the world on the basis of evidences, right? So it became completely based on evidences and experiments. So therefore then we can find that sometimes when scientific findings and scientific exploration began to differ from the religious systems and religious beliefs, and then there was a clash between science and religion. So and then there was a division between science and religion, and in some countries the kind of antagonism started between science and religions. The science explored basically the external world. Till recent time, science explored the external world, the material world, and it has been very successful in that respect. Science explored from the very atomic level and even subatomic level to the universe, to the galaxies, and now still exploring, right? Still exploring. And from that perspective, it has been really very helpful and very informative, and providing informations based on evidences and experiments, which has enriched human knowledge to a great extent. And also, as a result of the scientific findings, the technology used the discoveries and findings of the science, and then human society is either benefited or harmed by this. So it depends upon how the technologies are created and used by what kind of mind, the motivation behind those technologies. For example, the electricity, the microphone, the communication, and in the last 30, 40 years, and particularly in the last 20 years, the scientific development has been amazingly fast, right? Particularly in terms of the communication, and then transportation, right? And based on the exploration of the realities. And as I said, this has been a tremendous kind of achievement in human history. However, and this was based on this kind of concept that our well-beings can be you know, fulfilled by exploring the external world. The idea behind this is that if our senses are fulfilled, then our needs are fulfilled. And that is the idea behind. And therefore, the entire kind of enterprise of modern life and modern technology has been grounded on this kind of concept and idea that if our senses are fulfilled, then our needs are fulfilled. So therefore, every attempt is made to fulfill our senses, right? And then get pleasure out of that. And till 20th century, until maybe 70s and 80s, this has been the major trend of scientific exploration and findings. But then, even before that, many people within the scientific world have started getting within the scientific world as well as in the the world in which this kind of culture was the main trend of society, began to understand that by fulfilling the senses, our needs are not fulfilled to the extent, and sometimes it is even more harmful. And so then the question comes, where is the happiness, right? Where is the happiness? So now, many thinkers and scientists like Einstein and many have found that the external exploration is not going to be the end of our exploration. Rather, there is another world, which is the inner world, is much more deeper, which is to be explored, but it was a mystery for scientists till then. Because if it is to be based on a faith, then that was not acceptable to science. And if it is based on the many of the religious systems, with the assertion of supernatural powers and mysterious kind of systems and things like that, again that is not acceptable for scientists. As of course that was not at least digestible for scientists. So there was a kind of dilemma that there is something, but it is a mystery, that the inner world is there. We can feel that. The external sensual pleasures are not the end of our need. So what is that inner world? How that is to be explored, right? And that was the kind of stage where for a few decades that became a kind of question for the scientists, for thinkers, and for many explorers. But when scientists came to understand that already the inner world is very much explored in the Eastern, philosophical system and in the Eastern civilization, particularly in, of course, in Judeo-Christian system and in the Chinese and Egyptian and Indian, civilizations. They are basically based on the mystics and inner, the systems. When scientists came to know about the Indian system of the mind, which was explored more than 2,500 years in the rich system of Indian civilization, particularly which got evolved after Buddha, who introduced mind as the most powerful kind of entity in human life, and then it is the mind which can provide a means through its own transformation, provide happiness in life. And peace cannot be found outside the mind, but peace can be found only within oneself, only by exploring through the mental exercise. And particularly within the Buddhist philosophical system and psychological system and system of mind, or the science of mind, which now it is being accepted by modern scientists, the science of mind according to Indian system, and particularly according to the Nalanda Buddhist system. The science of mind, which depicts a very profound system of mind, which shows the problems that we have, the potentials that we have, by showing the clear picture of the system of mind with this different categories of mind which play in our life. Some of them belong to the virtuous category, and with the development of these virtuous mental elements, then we have better peace of mind. At the same time, we have innately, naturally have destructive emotions, and these destructive emotions play a prominent role in our life, which are responsible for making us unhappy. And then they are demonstrated, and then the ancient masters did serious research on these factors, that quite these factors, to the extent that just as in the external science we have the different elements, material elements, similarly the mental elements are searched, and the details of the elements. It is difficult for many people who do not have access to the understanding of the mind. It is difficult to, what is mind? We always have, constantly we are conscious, but how we are conscious, and what kind of mental elements are there, and how many mental elements are working in that, and how many of them are destructive, and how many of them are constructive, and how many of them are neutral. And those neutral states can be influenced either by negative or destructive emotions, or those neutral mental elements can also be influenced by the positive elements. So those details of the mental elements, they were studied through inner exploration, through experiment. So again, in the modern experiment and scientific exploration, there are two parameters, right? One is the third person experiment, right? And the second is repeatability. So every finding that is concluded by a scientific experiment should be based on third person experiment. That is to be the same result can be found by another person, and the same can be repeated again and again. And otherwise, it can be a kind of unique kind of finding which is not repeatable and which is not observable and doable for the third person, may not be the reality. And that is the general, the parameters of scientific research. But now, in case of the, the science of mind, research on mind, repeatability is there, but third person experiment is not possible, because you cannot, experience. Nobody can experience my mind, through their experiment. So therefore, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, it is good for those who have a scientific temperament to read His Holiness the Dalai Lama's book on Universe in Single Atom. He has, in course of so many discussions and interactions with the scientist, so he already in the beginning, it was his own curiosity. Out of curiosity, he wanted to, have interaction with the scientist, world's top scientists, physicists, neuroscientists, neuropsychologists, clinical scientists. And then during those interactions at the personal level, and he asked them serious questions which actually became a big question for the science as a discipline. Then they asked His Holiness his own view. Then His Holiness had his own, very profound thought on those issues, which came from the Buddhist kind of system of knowledge and science of mind and philosophy and things like that. So then eventually this kind of exercise turned into dialogue. More groups, more scientists joined the group, and then His Holiness also asked some Buddhist scientists, Buddhist philosophers and practitioners also participate. And then it was in the very beginning of the 1980s that about 20, 30 scientists and philosophers got together and started interaction. And then later on, the scientists took more interest in that. It was fascinating for the scientists to see those, the details of minds and the elements. And then they started exploring. Because earlier, anger, compassion, greed, loving kindness, these were not regarded as something that can be, worked on, and that can be identified, and that some research can be done, and some changes can be brought in a person's life in terms of reducing the anger and making the person peaceful, and promoting compassion and loving kindness, and thus making the person more peaceful. That was not thought of having such a kind of possibility. So then that began, right? But we will come in the later, in the next session. So this was a kind of exploration that the Buddhist masters have made on their own kind of scientific, research in exploring the mind, and then how anger works, how destructive it is in nature, how it develops, right? And so with all these kind of details, we can find that such a detailed accounts are, available. Let's see if I have some notes on those. So when we started exploring the inner world and the mind as a phenomenon and the detailed accounts of the mind, then the philosophy developed. That is how in Buddhism there are so many different kinds of philosophical systems. Primarily there are four philosophical systems based on their perceptions of the world and understanding of the world, because every philosophy is not suitable for everybody, right? So according to their need, according to their dispositions, Buddha gave different levels of teachings suitable to their capabilities and mental dispositions. And these four major schools also have sub-schools and sub-schools, and they explore the reality of the world and external and internal world. And that is why philosophy has become so important part of finding inner peace, because our perception of the world is so much relevant to how we see the world and then how we react to the world. If you see from morning till you go to bed, it is our reaction. There may be three persons, all of us, have a different reactions if we go into detail. In general, everybody wakes up and then take bath and take breakfast and go to their office. Looks very similar. But if you look into the details, their perception, their concept of the world, their reaction to the world are very, very different according to their individual perceptions, right? That is how philosophy has become a part of the inner, the part of the search of inner peace. So, when we talk about inner peace, then we must talk about compassion. So if I present before you from the Buddhist point of view, and particularly from the Mahayana point of view, for the last 2 days, those who are with me, we have been discussing about the mindful training, which is common with the Theravada and the Mahayana. And now, coming to the Mahayana practice of compassion. Of course, in Theravada, tradition, compassion is a very important part. But in Mahayana, there is more emphasis on the compassion, because the object of the compassion is not limited, but the object of the compassion is universal. It's not to extend it to the entire people on this earth, but to the entire beings, including insects and animals, and those tiny insects and other beings in the entire universe. And that is what is called the great compassion according to Mahayana. So according to Mahayana, when we look into the world, again we have to talk before that the rebirth, concept of rebirth. Because without the concept of rebirth, don't think there is any religious system or spiritual system. Because earlier in India, there was a Charvaka, materialistic kind of philosophy, who rejected rebirth, right? Just enjoy your life and then leave. You enjoy as much as in this life, that is all you can do and you must do. So that was the Charvaka's school's philosophy. Besides that, every philosophical school and religious system believed in rebirth. And in the Judeo-Christian and the religious system also, there is a rebirth. Birth in the sense that no one is going to be born again as a human being or whatever, but there is either heaven or purgatory or hell, right? So there is a continuation of life after this life. So that is why all the spiritual systems are based on the life after this life. That is why we are, according to Buddhism, this life is a tiny part of our entire journey, right? And whatever, according to a Tibetan kind of saying that whatever you are now is a projection of your past life. Wherever you are going to be is whatever is your mental state right now. That is going to be responsible where you are going to be projected in the next life. So therefore, we, according to Buddhist Mahayana tradition, we are to train ourselves to be more compassionate, right? And that compassion has to be developed deliberately, because every sentient being has a compassion, loving kindness as a mental component. There is no sentient being which does not have a compassion at all. But the difference is degrees. Some have the maximum and the fullest extended compassion, whereas some have very limited compassion. Right? So that this compassion has to be extended to the unlimited extent. That is called the Mahakaruna, the great compassion. Right? And now, how it is to be, cultivated and developed? Now, in the background of the thesis that we have, rebirth, and then beginningless rebirth, and then, countless rebirths in the coming, journeys. So we are supposed to, we must have been, benefited by kindness of others, just as we are benefited by others in this life, starting from our mother, who carried us in her, womb for 9 years with that, care, loving kindness, and then even after birth, then we are taking care. And after birth, if we were left without care even for a couple of hours, then we are gone. Right? So we are brought up with such a care, even treating ourselves more precious than her own life. Even at the cost of her own life, we are, taking care. And similarly, we have the, kindness of all other sentient beings. Now, according to the traditional kind of, the training of the cultivating or generating compassion, since we have had countless lives, during those lifetimes, we also received kindness from different people, from from mothers, in any kind of realm, wherever we have been born. So that kindness we have already received, and so in that manner, in this life, whether or not we recognize people, whether or not we recognize each and everyone, but we have received kindness from every sentient being. Now, if therefore we have to, deliberately train ourselves to understand that all sentient beings are like our mothers, and they have been in any of our previous life, have been a mother. Even if we take into account the kindness of this world, then we have a language, which is a wonderful, entity of human beings, which other, beings don't have. Animals don't have. Animals have a language to a very limited, but they do not have such a sophisticated language and script, which did not get evolved in just a few generations, but in, thousands and thousands of years time, all this got developed, and then we have received the, information, and now we are able to think and then talk, and receive information and communicate to the extent, to a very sophisticated level, that we are able to generate and cultivate compassion, right? And this kind of kindness must be, we must be grateful to all the sentient beings. And according to Mahayana, towards all the sentient beings, cultivating the, equanimity in the beginning is very important, because most of the common beings, all of the common beings, we can say that we divide beings into three categories, right? One category is the friends, the foes, and the indifferent. The indifferent category is a huge, but the friends category and the foes category. So why we have this? Now, if we look into the, nature of the friends, foes, and indifferent categories, then we have a very unjustifiable, reasons to categorize people into three categories. If we look into the nature of the people, why we have, a category of friends, and the beloved ones are not going to be there all the time. And the foes may also become friends, and we have experience in our life. So why we have such a fixated kind of idea about, the category of friends and foes? So it is changeable anytime. And from among the indifferents also, anyone can be our friends. So then, this development of equanimity is the basic training that we must have equanimity towards all beings. This is in the beginning. This is because it is difficult for common people to share love and compassion directly to to foes and to enemies. After some extent, then one can cultivate compassion and loving kindness towards foes equally as one has towards friends and beloved ones. But in the beginning, this is not that easy to do. So therefore, the training of equanimity is very important. And then after that, we must feel the kindness of the other sentient beings. And then once you have a strong feeling of the kindness, right? When we are convinced with the justifications of the kindness, then we can feel and cultivate the mentality of repaying their kindness, right? Once we have a feeling of repaying their kindness, then we have the mentality or attitude of loving kindness towards them. And then once we have a loving kindness feeling of loving kindness towards them, then we have the, the naturally, once we have a kind of, we perceive them as the beloved ones, then you have, naturally a feeling of concern for those beloved ones. When they are suffering, then how they may be freed from such, situations, in whatever situation they are. Because we are every human being, every sentient being, so long as they are not liberated, they are in the realm of suffering in different, ways. So the feeling of the compassion, the concern for others, when this is developed further and further, and it goes to the extent of a spontaneous state, then there is then you attain, or you develop a resolution to to benefit them. And when you look around, that are we in a position to benefit all the sentient beings at this moment? Then not at all we are in a situation to do that, because we are not even in a fullest extent capable of benefiting even a single person, right? How we can benefit the other person in the fullest extent? So in order to do that, we need to have the capacity to understand others' pains and pleasure, and their their mental capabilities, and then the power that you should have to benefit other sentient beings. So for that, you need to be adorned with the capacities, potentials, and the ability to benefit all sentient beings. In that, when we look around, the Buddha has the capability. It is not a kind of supernatural power, but the fullest, a fully developed person with the fully developed enlightened, and who is adorned with the capability to benefit other sentient beings by understanding the other person's need, requirement, and their mental state, right? So therefore, with this kind of the approach that only Buddhahood is in a position to benefit other sentient beings, then we have the aspiration to attain Buddhahood, and therefore then the bodhicitta is cultivated. So bodhicitta means the bodhi mind, that is to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all the sentient beings. When there is a spontaneous and a voluntary kind of cultivation or generation of this mentality, then there you have the bodhicitta. With the bodhicitta, then we enter into the other practices of the the Bodhisattva's way of life, like generosity, the ethics, the patience, and concentration, and then attaining the wisdom, right? So which are indeed required for our development. So compassion in our life, when we talk about compassion in long run, so what is that long run? I was questioning the organizers of this meeting, what kind of long run they had in their mind when they planned for this. Long run up to the Buddhahood, or long run for few lives, or long run in this life, right? Because compassion is not a luxury, but it is necessity. Because without compassion, let alone for Mahayana practitioner, without compassion, there is no way to go or to reach, even to reach to that level of near to the bodhicitta, attaining, cultivating bodhicitta. So, compassion is something that is required in our life, which is, as I say, not a luxury, but a necessity in our mind. Many people feel that compassion is something we are doing it to benefit others, for the benefit of others. But in reality, compassion is our individual necessity. If you have a compassionate mind, then you are at peace. As I was saying the other day, that if you have compassion, you are the first beneficiary of that practice. You get the peace of mind and you have more friends, right? So like that, compassion is a necessity, and on the contrary, all the afflictive mind which torments us, if we have any kind of problem in our life, even for a very short period of time, if you look into your mind, those are the afflictive mind that comes into the picture and starts playing in your mind. We always blame somebody else for our unhappiness or for our any kind of problem, but the problems are rooted in ourselves. So in order to solve the problem, we must have a compassionate, because compassion is, in a way we can say, like one medicine for 100 diseases. If you have compassion, then you can tackle with every kind of negative mind, right? Whatever kind of negative mind we have, which disturbs our pleasure or disturbs our peace of mind, as I said, that we always have a excuse. Oh, this has been done by that. If the person did not have done this, then I would have not said that, or even I would not have been disturbed. Or if that has not been the situation, then I would have been much more peaceful person. But in reality, it is not the case. Because we are already receptive and also not able to see the situation in the right manner, so the negative, afflictive emotions arise within ourselves, and then we react accordingly, right? So our reaction has a source of our inner kind of, afflictive mind, and that afflictive mind again is based on our perception of the world. So therefore, we need to make amendments within ourselves and bring transformation within ourselves. So the only way to bring peace is to bring transformation within ourselves by addressing these mental disturbing and destructive emotions. And if we cultivate compassion, feel concern for others, then we are opening our heart. By opening our heart, then we are circumscribing, or we are bringing other people also within our own we can say family, right? And like that, we are able to make our family larger. So quite often this question comes in our mind, that why in a family there are so much sacrifices, and there is so much kind of unity and compassion, because they have concern for one another, and they have out of that concern they can sacrifice for one another. But that is very limited to our family, right? And to our beloved ones. Now, the same, many people feel that, oh, this is a genetic, or it is kind of, based on a system of family. this cannot be extended beyond family. Of course, this can be extended beyond family. And if you have a larger family, then you would be happier. Right? So why don't we try to make our family larger and then, make more friends? That would be a source of happiness for us, right? So from Buddhist and particularly from Mahayana point of time, perspective, compassion is the basic source of happiness and the fundamental antidote for any kind of negative or displeasure or suffering. So compassion is the thing that, that is for a Buddha, or for, we can say, in our daily life, when you have a good motivation, motivated by compassion, then that, the action or plan or project, whatever you're going to do, either it is a short-term project or it's a long-term project, whatever, the project is very well motivated, right? Now, while the project is going on, again that compassion needs to be continued. If you lose the compassion, then your project is not going to move towards the right direction, right? So you have to maintain that compassion, and when the project starts benefiting or serving the goal, even at that stage, the compassion is very necessary. Because if you lose the compassion with which you have started with the motivation of compassion, then again you are going to lose the goal or purpose of the project. This is projected in the Buddhist treatise, saying that to become a Buddha, the foremost important seed, element like a seed is a compassion, which has motivated the person to practice and then attain Buddhahood, right? And then, while he is practicing, in that long course of practice, during that time, had he, lost compassion, then he would have been, distracted, lost the track of practice. So it is a compassion that keeps the person, that keeps the bodhisattva on track all the time till he reaches the Buddhahood, right? And during the Buddha, after attaining Buddhahood, then the Buddha benefits the sentient beings to the fullest extent. Why is that possible? Because of compassion, because of his concern, because of his spontaneous concern for beings. So therefore, compassion is important in the beginning, it is important in the middle, and it is important at the end as well. So compassion in our life at every moment is extremely not only important but necessity. So therefore, we must make effort to practice compassion. And from, as I said, from Mahayana point of view, compassion is the most kind of important element. So from a very general perspective, I would like to quote His Holiness. His Holiness says, in our lives, we constantly face critical situations. However, when these are met with the calm and clear mind, supported by spiritual practice, they can all be successfully resolved. But when our minds are clouded by hatred, selfishness, jealousy, and anger, we not only lose control, but lose a sense of judgment. At those wild moments, anything can happen. Our destructive emotions pollute our outlook, making healthy living impossible. We need to cleanse our internal perspective through the practice of wise compassion. So, whenever we have problem in our personal life, or whenever we have a problem in our society or community, we need to look into, the source of the problems. Then always, the source is not somewhere outside. Source is deep down in the individual person's mind. So this has to be found out. If we are intelligent, the educated people are supposed to be intelligent, right? So if we are really intelligent, then we should be smart enough to trace the origin of suffering, trace the origin of problems. If we trace the origin of problem, it is nowhere there in the external world, it is always there in your mind, right? And that has to be found out. Not simply saying that, oh, it is in my mind, but how that comes into and how that is manifested, that is manifested out of not understanding the reality. And then out of not understanding the reality, there is the greed, right? Greed for any kind of thing. When our greed is not met, or when our possessed things are going to be lost, or we are not going to possess something that we are very much cherishing for, when there is any kind of disturbance or any kind of likelihood of harm in achieving that or losing that, the beloved object, then we have anger. Right? Anger does not arise just out of blue. Whenever you have anger, just look into mind. What are the causes? Deep down there is a dissatisfaction. Deep down there is, a reason that you have. Either you are going to lose something, or you are not going to get something that you cherish for. Right? And now work on that. Is that something that is, that you should be very obsessed with? Or if you look into that, then you may find that it is not something that is so important, but you have made it so important out of your own kind of very narrow, attitude, right? Narrow, selfish viewpoint that we all common beings have, irrespective of their degrees, right? If we look into the nature of those negative, attitude, the greed, the anger, and then jealousy also is a part of our, greed. I don't have that, right? And why that person has. And now it has become a very big kind of entity in the West, particularly in America. These are being studied, and because people are, this is found in the society, particularly in modern society, self-criticism, right? Why I am not able to achieve that much that the other person has, and then they start comparing others, right? So this kind of self-criticism has become a big phenomenon in modern society, And these can be solved through investigating ourselves, through looking into ourselves. And then the compassion is the best kind of solution for that. If you rejoice for other people's, success, then there is no way of, envy, jealousy, right? If you rejoice other people's, happiness, then you are going to be part of that success. There's no way that you can be envy. So compassion, through cultivation of compassion, we are going to address so many of these, problems. And as I said, it is important to understand the details of how our mind functions, and then the detailed components of our mind. That is important. So, for immediate purpose and for long run, not only for this life, but to achieve enlightenment, compassion is the fundamental kind of necessity. Right? So we have some time for question and answer, and also this can be opened up as a forum for discussion. Everybody can participate. You can express your comment, give your comment, express your views, and we can interact, right? Okay.
Questions here? You can stand up. Speak.
Hello, Geshe. I understand that Dalai Lama is working with the scientists on the map of emotions to actually benefit the 7 millions of people in a secular way, like a computer model. So I was wondering, how's the progress of that project?
I didn't hear the beginning of your question. Can we pass this? You have to put it almost in your mouth.
Hello, Geshe. I understand that Dalai Lama is currently working with scientists on the map of emotion to actually help the 7 million people to develop compassion in a secular way. Like I think they're trying to develop like a computer model, and I understand that they are still working on it. So I'm wondering, do you know how's the progress and when this will be actually be be sort of like developed, and like a lot of countries will develop. I mean, a lot of countries will benefit from this project of emotion.
Yes.
They call it sometimes it's like a map. It's called map of emotions.
Map of emotions. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Atlas of emotions.
Yeah.
They call it map of emotions. Actually, it's like somehow like a study of global emotions.
Yeah, certainly.
So I was wondering how
His Holiness. Yeah. So this is a kind of major interest of His Holiness. Why His Holiness has termed secular ethics, is because in this world we have so many different religious systems, right? And also we have more than 1 billion who do not subscribe to a particular religious system. And also those who even subscribe to a religious system are not serious about their religion. So they are not serious practitioners. Even though all the religious systems emphasize on compassion, loving kindness, forgiveness, patience, equally, when you come to, when their metaphysical, stand and, the philosophical systems are very different, but when it comes to the practice, then every religion has the same kind of, message that peace, loving kindness, fraternity, brotherhood, forgiveness, these are the values, to be cultivated in every religion, right? So now, every religion says that then according to which there are different explanations, right? According to some, then the Creator has created, and based on that, we are all the children of the same, God. So that is not going to be suitable for many people, right? So like that, any particular religious system is not going to be suitable. So we need, and every person likes to be loved and has a compassionate mind, at least to some extent, at least towards their beloved ones, right? So how this can be promoted? So His Holiness is of the view that there can be a secular approach of developing these, the secular ethics, which is acceptable across the religious, systems, and the people who are not subscribing to any particular religion. Now, what is that which is required in this secular ethics is again addressing to our mind, mind, the destructive emotions, the positive emotions, and then educating people about these minds, right? About this mind. We are not the other day I was saying that 99.9 people are not aware of our inner mental system, right? And even, many people believe that whatever we are born with whichever kind of mentality, we are going to die with that. We cannot bring any change. Right? So, we have so many different, emotions, positive emotions, destructive emotions. So His Holiness, this is a very, his favorite the phrase, the map of mind. Just as we, in order to go to a particular place, we need to understand the map of that place and the road map where we should go and what are there and things like that. So in the similar manner, if we understand what kind of mental states, are products of different, products of the manifestations of different mental elements. It is very complex. But as I was saying in the beginning, that there has been a very elaborate, account of the mental elements, particularly in Indian philosophical systems and in the Nalanda system, that how these different mental elements play and manifest, and as a result of that we have a pleasant feeling and then unpleasant feeling, and then how we can energize ourselves and then get motivated for greater cause. These are all done through the exercise of those, the great details of the mental elements. So therefore, we may discuss this later in the next session, but the scientists have been neuroscientists. The scientists, and the philosophers and the meditators have been working on this, and now it is the scientists are also able to understand the complex systems of the mind, termed as destructive emotions and the constructive emotions. So I don't know whether we will have some kind of the computer apps that can fix your problem. I don't know whether this is possible at all, but I wish there would be something like that. Then you can go to hospital and change your chips and then come out as a different person, right? But certainly, with the help of these scientific findings, it is going to, bring a great change in our life and in the coming, in near future and in long run, certainly. Yes. You can pass on the microphone.
Questions?
And if other people have some comments and then issues to bring up with this secular ethics, that would be good, because secular ethics itself has become because again this secular term is a very for some countries secular has a different connotation. Just as in France and many other places, science evolved, and then science separated from, and the politics separated from church, and the education became secular. Secular in the sense of separating the church from, separating the politics and education from the church. But in India, secular has a different meaning. That secular is regarded to be, respecting all the religious systems. Sarva Dharma Sambhava, that is the term. Possibility of every religious, system in a society, happily, harmoniously, living together, and that has been the, tradition of Indian civilization for thousands of years. And in that context, it fits well. But then when this secular ethics was brought up in the West, some people had some reservations with respect to the term secular, and then some preferred universal ethics rather than secular ethics. But whatever we can say universal ethics, because that is really a universal in the sense that it covers every religious community, and then religious and non-religious community and systems. So this is going to have a very deep impact in our coming years to come. So any comment or any discussion you can any idea you can throw on this, you're most welcome. Or any other question you like.
Thank you, Krishna, for the teachings. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have two questions. First question is about, I often hear that loving kindness and compassion are two sides of the same coin. I just wonder, if we cultivate compassion, does it ultimately means that we are also cultivating loving kindness and vice versa? That's my first question.
Loving kindness and compassion, right? Yeah.
I know the difference now. The loving kindness is basically wishing others to be happy. And compassion is wishing all to be free from suffering. So it seems to be like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then my second question is with regard to compassion. When we generate compassion, usually it's based on understanding and reflecting on the suffering of suffering, right?
Yes, yes.
My question is, how can we balance the sadness that comes with this contemplation?
Say that again, please.
How can we balance the sadness that comes with this contemplation? Because when
sadness with
the contemplating of the suffering of others will generate some sadness. How can we balance this sadness with the compassion that we're trying to generate? Thank you.
Yeah. The first is about the loving kindness and compassion. These are very much like when we see, suppose the mother sees her child suffering, then she sees her child and then having a compassionate kind of attitude, how the suffering, wishing the suffering to be, removed, and free from, wishing the child free from suffering. And then at the same time, that freedom itself is a kind of, pleasure. And then having loving kindness is, it comes together with that, or followed by that. I wish my child to be happy, because while she does not want her child suffering, which means she wants her child happy. So these are very much, complementary to each other, and as you say, it is the two sides of the same coin. And this may not necessarily come in your mind spontaneously in one moment, but they are, supplementary to each other. The next question is about your, the sadness of, many people feel that the compassion is, it saddens you, and then it, you suffer out of that, and then that makes you suffering. But your own suffering or our own suffering and the kind of discomfort that we have by seeing the other people suffering are two very different things. When we are suffering, then it comes externally, and it might, if we are not strong enough, it might, oppress us, right? But when we see the suffering person, and then we share that the suffering, and the compassion arises, it comes as in the form of a strength from within, voluntarily, right? And the other suffering is involuntary. And this suffering that we have temporarily is, the voluntary, and it comes from within as a strength, and that gives us a confidence rather than disheartening us. So these two are very different. So that is why we have a great many, of course, the concept of bodhisattvas and things like that. And also we have many great people in our history, that how they are not physically strong that enough, they are not financially well off, and they are not necessarily very, politically well off in the beginning, but out of their sheer motivation, they struggled and became more powerful, more strong, and then they were able to work for, large number of people, right? That is because they developed that strength, they got that confidence, that kept building up, and then they emerged, or came to that extent of expanding their compassion and loving kindness to a large number of people, right? So that is very different. Two are very different, and our own suffering may put us into depression, but compassion will never put you in depression, but it will give you strength, and it will give you confidence to move further. So these are the fundamental differences. Yeah, please. Feel free, please. Feel free. Any kind of question, comment, you can.
I have two questions. It's quite simple. Where is our mind?
Where is our mind?
Yes.
Not too simple, this question is.
Then the second question is there such a place, Pure Land?
Oh.
Thank you.
So where is our mind? The neuroscientists find that it is in our skull, right? In our skull, the brain. Yeah, the brain. That jelly entity is our brain. And also it, that is the ground of our mind. But when we have an interaction with the neuroscientist, then always we have difficulty. In the beginning that was a major difficulty, but later, now our reference, when we say that mind, then we always refer to something that is not a brain, but something non-material kind of entity, right? When the neuroscientists they refer to mind, then they always refer to brain. So according to Buddhism, mind is, and then also according to Buddhism, it is not just simply, the mind is not with the beings who have a physical body. There are also realms which does not have a physical kind of body. They are bodiless, non-physical realm, right? Which is called arupa. So there is a concept of having a realm where there is no body. So then you cannot imagine having brain there, right? So mind is a non-physical entity, and after death, the mind moves from this body to the next body, and during that period, it is mind that moves. According to a tantric system, it moves with a very subtle kind of physical body, which is not a material physical body, but a very subtle physical body. So mind is a non-mental entity, and when we do research these days, then it is the brain where the functions of the mind are found, how they are functioning, right? So therefore, as we say that the sense, the physical, the six senses, right? The five senses, and the sixth one is the mental sense. The senses have their own kind of, the consciousness, the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and the nose consciousness, and the tongue consciousness, and skin consciousness. When the mind comes in contact with the object through their senses, then there is the consciousness, right? So the consciousness is a non-physical entity, but it is based, so long as we have this body, it is based on a physical body. And your second question is Pure Land. It is very, Buddhistic kind of the cosmological, spiritual cosmology, that there is a location called Pure Land, where after certain meritorious kind of achievements, then one takes birth in that. So according to Buddhist cosmology, there are many realms which exist out in the space, but which are not conceivable for the common beings. They are conceived by those persons who have the capability to see those things, and to to enjoy the life in that realm, because of the accumulation of merit. And we have the different realms. Even within the samsara, we have the rupa realms, arupa realms, and within the rupa realm, there are 17 different stages. So one reaches there out of the meditative kind of meditational progression, that one is able to cleanse one's mind with respect to, desire, and once the person is able to come out of the desire realm, then only the person is able to achieve the realm of the form, where there are certain kind of qualities to be, to be achieved through meditational processes. But still, these are all within the realm of samsara, within the cyclic existence.
Sheila,
Yeah, please.
I understand that compassion is very important and we build confidence. However, I want to ask about self-compassion, because a lot of people, especially people who really go into religion, disregard whether it's a Buddhist or Christian, they show a lot of compassion externally, like some Buddhists, even at ants, they try not to kill. But there are a lot of people who self-inflict themselves to a point that they even commit suicide. They go into depression, they go into commit suicide. And very often you hear that people who commit suicide are very kind people. They are very nice to outside, they are very compassionate. But towards themselves, the self-compassion is so difficult. Yeah. And I believe that self-compassion is actually a catalyst for really develop compassion for the outside.
Yeah, so I think this is true, that self-compassion is, very important for the cultivation of, genuine compassion. And you're right that there are many people who are, compassionate, but then they end up being very, leading a very miserable life for themselves, right? So I think this is, the compassion needs to be developed in the right process by developing strength and, confidence within oneself, so that the person is able to bear that situation, right? For example, when I was talking about this, Mahayana practice, the person, while the person is, developing compassion, he himself or herself is developing strength that is able to bear the, bear the burden of that, bear the situation, right, and then tackle the situation. This is how internally the person develops, and he or her, inner strength is developing according to the development of the compassion. So the compassion develops, the inner strength develops. So when the compassion becomes to the immeasurable, when the compassion goes to the unlimited extent, the person becomes bearable to the to bear the suffering of unlimited sentient beings. Otherwise, being in a very common state, it would not be possible to bear the suffering of entire sentient beings. Let alone it is difficult to bear the suffering of a very beloved person, very few people, right? But once this kind of compassion, the real genuine compassion, having a genuine concern for others, when this is developed, the inner strength is developed, in parallel, and to the extent that they, as I said, they come to the extent of unlimited compassion. The person is ready to bear the suffering of unlimited sentient beings, and accordingly they have the inner strength to go further with the other spiritual practices, and then lead to the path to enlightenment, right? So there is no such a case of saying that the Bodhisattva, after a certain extent, then ended up one's life or something like that. Of course, there are many cases of, the bodhisattvas sacrificing their life for others, not out of depression, right?
Sorry, Geshe, so how do we really practice self-compassion?
Yeah, so right. So if we develop compassion in the right manner, having a concern, very sincere concern, with the understanding of the situation of the sentient beings, the reality of the life of other beings, life of oneself, and on the top of that, understanding the situation of the mind, having a proper understanding of the mind and the developmental process of mind, right? And there are, several, systems and ways of training mind training, right? One must go through those kind of mind training, which are in practice for, several centuries and for thousands of years, right? And that mind training gives the person the strength to face and develop a genuine compassion, which will not lead that person to depression. Yes, please.
Can I add 2 questions?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, the first question is I'd like to know the difference between compassion and bodhicitta.
Okay.
Okay, compassion, is it when we have compassion, we actually have, we are still have this attachment. With bodhicitta, because the wish to achieve enlightenment to benefit sentient beings, we sort of like let go our attachment. Okay, so I would like to, because bodhicitta is a kind of greater compassion. So I just want to know the difference. And then the number 2, the question is, what is this subtle energy below our navel? It's a subtle energy. It's a subtle energy below our navel. Navel here.
Oh, I see.
So no,
I thought
subtle energy. Is this
below our neighbor?
Is the subtle mind here?
Subtle energy.
Yeah.
That is tantric, compassion and bodhicitta are different in the sense that compassion is among the causal kind of factors for bodhicitta. Unless you have a genuine compassion, you cannot develop bodhicitta, because compassion is having concern for others, seeing the suffering of others. And now bodhicitta, for the cultivation of bodhicitta, generation of bodhicitta, the person practitioner must see the suffering of entire sentient beings, not just a limited sentient being. So entire sentient being, and then that should also be a spontaneous kind of compassion. And once that kind of compassion is there, then there is a resolution, followed by that. Yes, I must, I must dedicate myself for the suffering beings. And then, as I said earlier, that when he looks around, then in this very situation, when I am not in a situation to benefit even 10 people, then how we are going to benefit the entire sentient beings? Then he looks around, and then having a state of realization where the person is completely free from afflictive mind, negativities, and is adorned with all spiritual power of benefiting others, then the person can benefit others in a genuine way, right? So therefore, seeing the Buddhahood as an instrument to benefit others, not that I would like to attain enlightenment. That is why I have to generate bodhicitta for others. That is the reverse. Bodhicitta doesn't happen like that. Bodhicitta is not cultivated with that kind of motivation. Rather, bodhicitta is cultivated taking Buddhahood as an instrument to benefit entire sentient beings. That as to be the best instrument with which one can benefit other sentient beings to the maximum way. And so, in order to do that, one accomplish the benefits of other sentient beings, then Buddhahood is necessary. Therefore, at that stage, the bodhicitta is cultivated. So, compassion is a prerequisite for cultivation of bodhicitta. Right? And the subtle energy, yes, there are many energy for points in our body, and then the tomo is the one which is at the navel, position, which can be activated at some through these are these subtle physiological systems which are not discernible through the modern medical dissections, but there is a whole nervous system of the spiritual nervous system according to the spiritual tradition, how it functions, and then how the subtle energies pass into these the nervous systems and things like that, and they are very much associated with your the status of spiritual realizations. Last question, if there is one. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. You need to speak constantly so that you pick up the signal. It's like that.
Okay. Geshe, just now you mentioned about great compassion is to be developed deliberately, and then followed by later, compassion is an individual fundamental necessity whereby it is supposed to be genuine, spontaneous, and unconditional. So the deliberately, how does it,
Unspoken, yes. Right. In the beginning, we have to develop it deliberately. We have, as I said in the beginning, that every sentient being has the component of compassion, the compassion component in their mental system. It is there. Buddhism believes all sentient beings, can attain Buddhahood, right? All sentient beings have the same, the mental system, irrespective of certain sophistications, right? Even the most wrathful beast, they have their, kins and their, kids towards which they have, caring kind of and concern, right? The most wrathful beast we see, they have also the same kind of, concern, irrespective of the degree. Even in our human society, we have differences by birth. Some have greater degree of compassion, some have lesser degree of compassion, but everybody has the compassion, and this compassion, which is right there, needs to be developed. Right now, as a common person, we have a compassion only to our beloved ones, only to those towards whom we have concern. Now, with the reasoning and understanding of the situation, having a broader sense of understanding, having a broader sense of our society, and a broader, the welfare of society, then we can understand, and it becomes justifiable that yes, a greater sense of compassion is required. So that kind of greater sense of genuine, compassion is not only required but also necessity these days, because we cannot live being selfish all the time, either at the individual level or at the national level. We have become a global, the whole entire globe has become a small village now. Everything is, shared. Earlier, maybe even 50 or 100 years back, the environment is not affected. Environment is very local, politics are local, economy was local, everything was localized. But now it has become, global. Environment is globally shared. If somebody at certain point of, certain region of the world pollutes the, environment, that affects the entire world. And then when there is economic kind of, a problem in one section of the region of the world, then it affects the entire world. When there is a problem in one region, then gradually the ripple comes to the rest of the world. So Buddhism has been thinking about this even before that, globalization. I used to say that right from the beginning, the Mahayana tradition and Buddhism in general, and Indian culture in general, has been thinking about not only globalization but universalization of our mentality, right? The universalization of our mentality, not in the universalization of the market, but our mental contribution, our concern for other sentient beings, and how we can benefit others, how we can share our, the service to others to the maximum way. So this is something that we need to develop through reasonings, through our developing our understanding, and then gradually it becomes, in the beginning that is not acceptable, then after a certain reasoning it becomes acceptable, and then after a certain time of period, then it becomes, to that extent, it not only becomes acceptable, but it becomes a part of your thinking, right? And it becomes your spontaneous kind of reaction. And then you have to move further and further. And then the compassion becomes spontaneous, right? And that kind of spontaneity of compassion has to be developed in the beginning deliberately, right? Just as, music player, they play the experts of the musicians, expertise, they do it spontaneously, but in the beginning they have to learn with a great, deliberation, right? And then after a certain, a period, then it becomes spontaneous. So similar is the case with all of us, that once we train our mind, then it becomes so spontaneous. Right? And how, right at the very childhood, we were not spontaneously, attracted to something that we are attracted today. But in course of time, when we are exposed to that kind of culture, that kind of trend, that kind of way of life, then it becomes spontaneous, right? So we are, human beings are very adaptable, right? So we can adapt to good things, and then we can adapt to also shunning out or abandoning the bad things as well. We are, that is the greatest kind of, quality of human beings. That is why the Buddhahood is achievable, Nirvana is achievable for everyone.